environmental information. So I have a lot of experience working with different programs, but took this opportunity to work on the newly established National Program Manager for Regional Labs as a special opportunity. And it has really been a lot of fun. I've been here less than a year, but it's really interesting and a part of the agency I've never had a chance to appreciate before. So with that, today I'm going to give you an overview on EPA's National Program Manager for Regional Labs. This was a program that was recently established in 2019. I'm going to talk about how the National Program Manager for Regional Labs program operates and how we coordinate across EPA's regional laboratories, and then also with the larger laboratory enterprise. And when I say laboratory enterprise, what I mean is the Office of Research and Development's big laboratories, collection of laboratories, the program office laboratories. So several of our program offices have their own laboratories. Our Office of Water, Office of Air has some of their own laboratories. Office of Land and Emergency Management has their own laboratories. Enforcement has its own laboratories. So that's what I mean by laboratory enterprise, the ORD labs, the program office labs, and the regional laboratories. And of course, all 10 of EPA's regional offices has its own laboratory. I'm going to touch on the role of the laboratory divisions, the role that they play in quality assurance, which I know this is the topic of the conference, so we're not gonna shortchange that too much, I hope. And I'm hoping that there are colleagues from the regional labs who will be able to jump in if there are questions that I can't answer about how the QA components work in the regional labs. And then I want to finish up with talking about where the national program wants to go in the future to best support the needs and the mission of EPA. So with that, next slide. I'm going to give a little bit of background. So as I said, the new National Program for Regional Laboratories was established in 2019. In February, the slide that you see now, there was an email message that went to everybody at EPA announcing the plan to designate the Office of Research and Development as the National Program Manager for the agency's regional labs. And this was responsive to a number of suggestions and reports that we had received over several decades about running the regional labs. It was also taking advantage of some of the work that already existed at EPA. For example, there's a lab enterprise forum that was established to increase the effectiveness and collaboration of laboratories across the agency. But getting to the kinds of reports that we have seen over the years and what we were responding to for over 20 years, external advisors, including the General Accounting Office and the National Research Council, have recommended that EPA manage its laboratories more as an enterprise, with the vision that agency partners could work together to provide strategic direction and budgetary alignment to strengthen laboratory performance, including things like metrics on timeliness and quality of lab work. We could potentially look at options to centralize and consolidate laboratory services, contracts, FTE to save money to be more efficient, and that we could increase the collaboration and coordination across the labs and EPA's lab enterprise. So again, we got these various reports that you see on the screen, including the 2014 report from the National Research Council called Rethinking the Components, Coordination and Management of EPA's Regional Laboratories, and from GAO saying EPA needs to take a more coordinated approach to managing its laboratories. And then there was this big report you see on the right, an EPA internal report, where we looked at the laboratories and how they functioned and made some recommendations of our own. So next slide. I'm going to just give you an idea of who does the work in the new national program. So we have a small team within the Office of Research and Development, myself and my colleagues. Brooke Holmes is here with us today. I think she's the only one of our small team who is at this conference today. So we have a small number of people who this is what they do. This is all they do is work on laboratory coordination. We also have a couple people on the right side of this slide who help us very much on and I kind of call them my auxiliary team, and who help with budget and metrics, as well as a couple of fellows who work with us and pretty much outthink all of us and do a lot of the work. So that's our own internal Office of Research and Development team. And then on the next slide, this shows all the people that we coordinate with in the regional laboratories. So around the same time that EPA announced that it was establishing a new national program for regional laboratories, the EPA regional offices all reorganized to create new divisions. And those divisions are all have the same name. They're the Laboratory Services and Applied Science Divisions. And so you can see on this slide, we have 10 division directors, they have deputies, they have regional lab managers. These are all really important people in our universe. And then for you all, we also have the names of the regional quality assurance managers and branch chiefs. I think those are maybe the more significant contacts for this audience. I will say that we are in pretty close coordination with the laboratory directors and their deputies and their lab managers. Some of the directors during the transition to a new administration, they have moved into other roles temporarily. In Region 2, Anahita Williamson has moved into the role of acting Deputy Regional Administrator, and John Blevins in Region 4 has moved into the role of acting Regional Administrator. So people have moved up from deputy to acting director to backfill them while they're doing that important work. So these are the people who do the work. The next slide is an overview of the quality assurance provided by the regional laboratories. And there's a lot on this slide. I'm not going to read every word of it, but this is the work that the regional labs do with quality assurance. And while there are a lot of variations across the EPA regions, these labs science divisions are not identical across regions. The majority of the regional lab divisions are what we call integrated divisions, meaning that they provide quality assurance and field work in addition to the laboratory services they provide. And they work very hard to do internal quality assurance management and collaborate with the states and tribes and interpret and implement quality policies and regulations. And so they do all this the work on this slide, plus lots of other things that probably aren't included on the slide, but they're very important to the integrated divisions to provide quality assurance and coordinate both internally and externally. So the next slide takes us back to our life as a national program. And so setting up a new national program, we've had to do a lot of looking within, looking at how the laboratories, how their FTE are supported by the different EPA program offices. We've had to look at how the laboratory budgets are supported, and we've had to understand and get a good sense of where are the most urgent needs and priorities. So the budget story for me in my less than a year in this job has been incredibly challenging and probably, well, not probably, is certainly one of our top priorities. This slide shows some of the history of funding for capital equipment in our laboratories, in our regional laboratories. The blue line is the EPM account, and you can see that's a very sad story. That account has been cut over and over again, and probably not even intentionally. It's just where it sits in the budget. So we're working on putting it in a different place so it doesn't get cut as easily. And then the Superfund support for capital equipment, which is a little bit better story, but still it's a challenge. It's a very difficult challenge for our regional labs to make sure that their capital equipment is funded and kept up to date and replaced when it needs to be replaced. So next slide shows our W-2 funding, which covers lab supplies and overhead and some of those costs. And this looks a little bit better. It's at least a flatter funding picture over the years. However, it doesn't really take inflation into account. So you can see that orange line shows where it should be if it were to be adjusted for inflation. So still another challenge to funding for the regional laboratories. So next slide. Looking within, we've done multiple data calls for our regional lab participants to look at how to best support the labs. We've looked at things like what they spend on IT, what they spend on infrastructure, on service and maintenance agreements, how they support field equipment. And there have been sort of two parts of data calls. The first part was done last year from January, between January and May, that looked at how FTE in the regional labs are supported by the EPA programs. And they actually found some disparities, meaning that some programs supported the FTE that were doing work for them, and some programs over supported FTE and they weren't necessarily getting work for the money that they spent to support the lab FTE. So we found that out, which is a good thing, and we're addressing it. We have a plan to address those imbalances, those disparities that we found. This year, we're doing part 2, and we're looking at the budget, and we're looking at the funding for capital equipment and W-2 and support for the lab FTE and the associated overhead. And that part of the analysis, that look within, is wrapping up right now, and we're getting in at the point where recommendations are getting made to senior management at EPA on what to do, what did we find, and what to do in moving into the future. So next slide. So back to what we were doing as an NPM. What I just described was what we call the workload assessment. How are the FTEs supported, and what do they do, and is there enough? Which we know the answer is no, there's never going to be enough money. At least if I were able to drive up a truck to every regional lab and dump money there, I think we'd be in better shape, but we're nowhere near that. And of course, I don't have that ability. So that's a big part of what we do as a national program, is try and get them what they need to support the agency's mission. As a new executive lead for the NPM program, we did virtual visits last year with our LSASD divisions, those regional lab divisions. We visited all 10 of them between August and October. Last year, we visited all 10 regions. We did virtual tours of their laboratory space. We got to meet their program partners. We got to meet their Superfund division directors, their water directors, their enforcement folks, their Office of Mission Support people, their air people. So we got a good idea of who they worked with and what some of their specific challenges are in the regional programs. So with those visits, we were able to develop what I like to think of as a treasure trove of information. What are the challenges and what are the strengths? And what are they particularly good at, and what are the different environmental problems from region to region. We got a very good sense of that by doing those virtual visits. The next thing that we've been working on is a strategic plan. We worked with the lab directors across the 10 regions to write a strategic plan, planning to have a plan for the entire lab enterprise and keeping it open so that future versions of it would cover the whole lab enterprise. It was mostly focused on the regional labs, written at a very aspirational level. Where are we now? Where did we come from? Where do we want to be as a laboratory enterprise? Where do we need to be as regional labs to best support the mission of the agency? And so we finished writing a strategic plan. It's actually in final draft right now, and it's going to go through cross-agency review, but the work is done, and we're going to be turning that strategic plan into an action plan. So in addition to the strategic plan, we're going to be adding an action plan where we're turning, we had many suggestions for what we could do to get us to where we want to go. So we're going to be developing action plans, working with the regional laboratories to develop actionable steps and deadlines for those things. The other thing we're doing is looking at core and specialized. One of the things we did looking within was looking at core and specialized methods. And on this slide, it shows some of the things that we've done to look at methods and why regional methods had to be developed for some of the work that they need to do. For a lot of different reasons, needing lower detection limits to comply with local regulations and circumstances, unique sample preparations that might be needed. You need unique matrices for looking at things like fish tissue, for looking at oils and paints and surfactants. We needed to just look at what is in our regional methods that have been either needed to be created, altered, or adapted to regional conditions. And then finally, there we go. The other thing that we do as an NPM is communications. And we want to make sure that we're becoming known. It's a new NPM. Make sure that our partners are aware of us and they know to work with us and we know to work with them. One of the things we're doing internally in EPA is we're going to start a series of annual, what we're calling laboratory enterprise showcase meetings. This year it's going to be in late June, and it's going to be all the components of the laboratory enterprise, the ORD labs, the regional labs, and the program office labs. It's going to talk about what they do, some of their challenges, how they've figured out how to solve problems, and share that information to get to know each other and know that each other exist, and also to have some discussions, kickoff discussions on things that are of mutual interest and things that they're all dealing with. Like there are a lot of facilities issues, for example, in EPA offices and laboratories that are challenging, but there are also opportunities to use equipment more strategically and share equipment when we can. On our communications, we're also looking outward. So today's meeting, we've done a lot of communications outward in other fora. And next week, we're going to be, I'm going to be moderating a session at the Association of Public Health Laboratories annual conference, where we're having regional lab participants and ORD participants talk about methods that have been developed to analyze for PFAS contaminants. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing on the communications end. So next slide. So this is sort of what we do and what we're working on and what we what our future focus is. It's kind of gives you an idea of all of the work that the NPM does, the workload analysis, the communication, linking laboratories, both the regional laboratories to each other and then to the other parts of the lab enterprise, advocacy to the program office, partner labs and offices, for example, Superfund, water enforcement, developing and sustaining metrics. And that was a big priority for the last administration, is being carried into this administration, where you look at how you're doing and you report on it, talk to each other about it, make sure that it's continuing to sustain itself, or you're doing a good job in lab quality, and also turnaround time are the couple of metrics that we have established for this program. And then to have a voice at the table. We're in headquarters at EPA. We work really closely with the regional laboratories, as I've said, but shaping agency policy, for example, one of the best examples I can give is the response to COVID. There was no vacation for the regional labs to adapt to the COVID pandemic. We couldn't stop running samples, although some of the samples were slowed down and some of the work was slowed down. Really, it didn't go away completely, and the regional labs had to be there to run analyses for samples that were taken and support the agency. So they worked very closely together and figured out how to keep people safe, to keep people socially distanced, so they could still come in and do the lab work, as obviously you can't do that remotely. So they really led the way, and understanding how they did it, what they did to keep people safe, working in the time of the pandemic, really did inform agency policy. And I was able to speak for them sometimes to meetings that were convened among the headquarters folks, or at the more senior levels. I was able to speak to what they did and how they were successful, so other people could learn from their experience. So that's a snapshot of what we do as a national program for regional laboratories. In conclusion, there's been a lot that's been going on as we've taken on this role to create and develop a national program. There's been a lot of excitement and enthusiasm in establishing the new program. It's been a great opportunity to support our regional laboratories, who at the foundation do much of the foundational work to support EPA's mission, and to better link them up with other components of the laboratory enterprise. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention to this presentation, and I am happy to entertain any questions.
Great. Thank you, Becky. I appreciate that very, very, very much. So a couple of notes here in the chat. I put the link to Becky's presentation, which she prepared early and on time. Thank you, Becky, so that we could make it available to folks. And so if folks have questions, why don't you raise your hand, or dump the questions into the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. We've got about 20 minutes for question and answer, should we need it. So please jump in, folks. Yeah, Laura, I see that you unmuted yourself. Laura, why don't I go to you, and then Nora, I'll come to you.
Hi, Becky. Presentation, really long time coming based on all those reports that you reminded us about. I am wondering, you mentioned that your future focus includes shaping agency policy. And I have become concerned about our policies on laboratory accreditation. They fall under the umbrella of the STPC, which is a cross-agency working group. And so it seems like those might be policies better administered under the NPM. Has there been any conversation along those lines?
That's a great question, and I'm not aware of conversations, but we can certainly talk offline. And one of the things that I didn't mention, and sometimes it's not clear because there are a lot of different parts of the Office of Research and Development. We have a sister office. The acronym is OSAPE. They run the regional science program. And they also, I believe, are linked closely in with the work that the STPC does. But we talk with them all the time because I want to make sure that anything we're doing is not a surprise to them and vice versa. So I'm happy to have some conversations offline with you, and we can figure it out.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Laura. Nora, please go ahead and unmute yourself, and then I will lower your hand, and then I will move to the questions that are coming into the chat. So Nora, you're
All right,
up.
thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Becky. I am a Region 1 Quality Assurance Chemist, so I reside in the LSASD facility, but I'm not part of the lab. So I have two questions. One is, in future plans, are they looking to incorporate both the field services branch and the QA branch into this lab national program? And secondly, the plans for evaluating facilities, where does that fit on the strategic plan?
Right. So I'm gonna step away from facilities for a second because it's the Office of Management Services, OMS, who is in charge of that, and certainly we hear a lot about facilities from the regional labs, but it's not in our strategic plan at all, except at a very high level, but we're certainly aware of it. So about QA and field services, you know, with the new program, as I said, you're looking at it and you're just trying to understand what is, and the regions are not all identical. Region 1 has an integrated program. Most of the regions have integrated programs, but not all. And it would be easier and more logical if they all were exactly the same, but they're just not right now. And it's you know, it's pretty brand new. I would imagine that those programs, well, I'm not going to say anything that I'll regret later. It seems like it would be good if they all looked the same and that we you know, we are all speaking on the same language with the same people. But I do know that QA is under a different AA-ship and for right now, and I'm not quite sure what the future looks like. So I've not answered your questions at all.
It's okay. I understand that with changes that it takes time and there's complexity, but residing at a laboratory and as these changes go, it's impactful. So looking for information wherever we can get it.
Yep. Well,
thank you.
Yeah, sure. Well, and then I see a question from Nick Gannon in Region 6. So can I go ahead and address that one?
Yeah, and so Becky, what I was thinking, you can address that one from Nick Gannon, and then I've got about 2 or 3 others that are in the chat that I'll tee up for you, and then I'll come to Linda. So why don't you address Nick's, then I'll queue you up with a couple in the chat, and then we can come to Linda with a verbal question.
Okay, so Nick's question is, can you speak to the pros and cons of co-locating the regional labs, Region 4, Region 6, Region 9, with the ORD lab facilities? So what I will speak to is how much attention this has gotten. It's definitely a significant issue in the agency. It's touching a lot of different offices. It's touching our program. It's certainly touching Region 6 very strongly, Region 4, Region 9, Region 8. There's a big move to consolidate, to co-locate, to get some of these facilities together. And it's not always a comfortable move or a desirable move for every single person who's being touched by it. I will say, Nick, it is something that we're going to try and address in our Lab Enterprise Showcase, which is an internal EPA meeting that we're having at the end of June. We're going to have a senior person from the Office of Management Support, Office of Mission Support, sorry, OMS, to talk about why OMS is leading this consolidation. And we're also going to be having an ORD person from Region 4 and hopefully a Region 4 person talking about what co-locating has been like for them in Athens, Georgia. And we're going to have Region 8, a senior official from Region 8 talking about co-locating with the Enforcement Office, NEIC, in outside of Denver, Lakewood, Colorado. So we're going to talk about why we're doing the co-location and the consolidation of labs, and also what the experience has been like for people and lessons learned. And we know it's not the only, we're not going to, Region 9 will be right in the middle of their co-location. So they don't really want to talk about it while they're doing it. And I understand that completely. So we're hoping that it will at least tee up the issue and get kind of all the concerns out so that we can have some additional conversations about this and at least understand the why from OMS's point of view, and then what does it mean to everybody who's being moved around.
Great. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Nick, for the question. Okay, so I have a couple of questions having to do with some of the slides you showed on budget, Becky. The first question is, have the capital equipment budgets been changed based on your research? And then a second question had to do with, have you broken down workload by EPA FTE and contact FTE? So the first question, equipment budgets changed on your research, and then the FTE question.
No, we have not been able to change the capital equipment budgets yet. And I want to make yet in capital letters. It's really obvious that it's a serious problem for the agency. So we're working as many different strategies. We've written multiple budget initiatives. We're talking to everybody we know. We're thinking about some other ways that we can get there. Our regional labs are really at the point where it's hard for them to respond sometimes because their equipment is pretty old, beyond its useful life. So we know it's a significant issue. And what was the other part of the question? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry I did that to you, Becky. I thought the first question was going to be quick, so I teed up two, but I didn't realize it was that nuanced. The second question, I'm sorry I did that to you. The second question is, have you broken down the workload by EPA FTE and contract FTE?
Yeah, and so we're working on that. That's not a very satisfying answer, I know. And it's not quite so simple as the number of analyses per FTE, because some of these integrated divisions, which most of them are, do more than just the sample analysis. They also do QA and they also do field work. So what you're getting from the integrated regional laboratories is very different than just the number of analyses per FTE. So it's a complicated issue. We're definitely working at it. We're definitely looking at the contract lab budgets as well. And I, sorry, I don't have the perfect answer yet, but it's definitely on our radar screen pretty high up.
Okay, thank you, Becky. I'm going to have one more question in the chat, then Linda, I'm going to come to you, and then I'll come to the other questions in the chat. The next question is, on the regional lab baseline, what is meant by a common lab versus regional lab? Are the current regional labs what would be considered common, and if so, what are the new regional labs?
So I believe, so this isn't my slide, I believe this naming were common means common methods that everybody uses. And so that's and these were, established, known methods that everybody uses. Regional methods are ones that were adapted or altered because of some other the need to do the analysis a different way. They were altered to get to a lower detection limit because that's the local limit, and you have to adapt the method for that, to adapt for unique kind of sample prep you might need to do, and unique kind of matrices that you don't see in every place in the country. So that's what's meant by common, regional, and program methods. Program methods are ones that were developed by program offices for the specific statutes that they're trying to implement.
Great. Thank you, Becky. Linda, please go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you. Linda, go ahead.
Hi, Becky. This is Linda Himmelbauer. I'm the QA manager in Region 8, and I'm on detail to EQMD for about a year. My question is about third-party accreditation of EPA laboratories, specifically the regional laboratories. My understanding was that at some point there was an ORD policy that came out from the Forum of Environmental Measurement, the FEM group, that required EPA laboratories to be third-party accredited. And there were, and my understanding is that that particular FEM group doesn't exist anymore. So I'm wondering if that policy has been taken up by you all as MPM to, I guess, to enforce, or if the policy still exists. And the second part of my question is, there were two other policies that came out of the FEM group, one for lab competency through third-party accreditation or equivalent, and for grants, and then one for contracts. And so just wondering where, if these policies are going to be, or if your MPM is now going to be in charge of the policies. And I can repeat that. Sorry if I was a little confusing.
No, that's okay. No, I mean, the good news is, I think for right this second is no, we haven't taken up either of the two parts of your question. I think it's certainly possible that we would, and let's follow up after this, and you can tell me some more about it, and I can look around and see what has happened to things that look like they've disappeared, or maybe it's better not to ask. I don't know.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's fairly recent. So we're, so it might just be we need to kind of track down where these policies are living right now.
Yeah, I'm happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
Suss it out. Sure.
And thank you, Linda. Thank you, Becky. I got a couple more questions in chat. We probably have time for 3 more questions. So we're in great shape here. The next question, Becky, is what role does field deployable analytic instrumentation have in the capital equipment budget and strategy for the regional labs as real-time measurement technology to generate definitive data and EPA's experience with it advances? Will lab resources adapt?
Wow, is there somebody in the audience who wants to take that question? No, I'm serious. I think there are a lot of great regional lab folks in here. I think that is a better question addressed to them if somebody wants to take it on.
Okay, I'm going to put, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the next question. I'm going to put that question into the chat, and then I'll invite folks to ask that question, to answer that question. So the next question for you, Becky, is what role do lab staff have in strategic planning, if any?
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting question. So, so we have been working with the LSASD directors, the division directors themselves to write this strategic plan. They have been working within their divisions to talk about it, to develop parts of it, but I can't speak for them and tell you how much they have within any one region. I can't answer that question. That's more of a question for them. Again, we went through quite a while of just figuring out what does it mean to have a strategic plan for the lab enterprise. Is it really the whole lab enterprise, or is it just the regional lab part of the lab enterprise? There was a lot of back and forth, and in fact, I inherited this job from Fred Haukman who was the original executive lead for regional laboratories when he retired. I inherited the strategic plan and we turned it into a strategic plan. But it's at a very high, very aspirational level. It's not down in the weeds where we figure out exactly what it is we're going to do to meet those strategic directions that we've laid out for the program. I think that is the part where we can bring in more people in the regional labs to help us write that action plan and have specific, down to earth measures and methods that we can, or actions that we can take to get us where we want to go strategically. So I know Fred and I both worked with the LSASD directors, and I know they consulted with their staff. I can't answer the question as to who, but there's a terrific opportunity to help us write the action plan that will go with that and help us actually do all the things we need to do to get us where we want to go.
Fabulous. Thank you, Becky. Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. And so I put that question in the chat. So I want to open it up to the folks here. I saw that a couple of folks unmuted. Sarah, perhaps you unmuted to answer the question, but what role does field deployable analytic instrumentation have in the capital equipment budget and strategy for regional labs? And, as a technology, as the technology advances, will lab resources adapt? Anyone want to take a run at that? Just go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in. Maybe identify who you are first. Anybody out there? You can press that unmute button, the little microphone icon on the bottom left. Don't be shy. You won't be held to this answer. So at this point, if you're thinking someone else is going to, I know the answer to this, but someone else is going to answer it, the answer is probably no, someone else isn't going to answer it. So if you think you have an answer, please jump in.
This is David Charters with the Superfund program.
Sweet.
Are
David.
we talking about buying equipment for use by contractors or by the actual EPA personnel? We have a lot of, in our program office, we have a lot of real-time measures, but they're run by contractors, and that's a different source of money to buy that equipment.
David, thank you for jumping in. I don't know, the question did not specify that, so I'm thinking that perhaps it was EPA labs, but just guessing. Okay, so not hearing an answer to that question. We've got about a minute left here. So Becky, I'm going to see if you have any final words, and then I want to issue instructions to folks about what's going to happen over the course of the next 20 minutes. I want to, before I turn over to you, Becky, I want to just thank Becky, your presentation and your participation and preparation, and thank participants for the questions. That was awesome. Becky, any final thoughts here?
No, thank you for the great questions. I'll say the same thing that Rob just said, and it has really been a pleasure and an honor to work with the regional laboratories and with the whole lab enterprise. I left ORD for a while and came back, and I'm actually glad I did. I never thought I would see myself back in the Office of Research and Development, but it's a really exciting program, and there's a lot of improvements to make, but we've got a great start. So thank you all.
Okay,